You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. Tonight's story isn't about a hunter or a camper, but a woman named Bobbi who set up a tent on her family's land in southwest Pennsylvania to grieve the loss of a close friend. But in the quiet of the forest, something began to respond. A bird's nest left at her tent, religious statues vanishing without a trace, and a mysterious ball of peeled branches left beneath a broken limb. Then came the guttural whoops, the tree crashes, and the feeling that someone or something was watching. This isn't a secondhand tale. It's Bobbi's first-hand account of what happened deep in the Laurel Ridge, just east of the infamous Chestnut Ridge in Pennsylvania. So stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, I've got the privilege of talking to Bobbi today. Bobbi's an individual that reached out to me through email about some really interesting things that she's experienced over the years out there in southwest Pennsylvania. So how's it going today, Bobbi?
Oh, it's going pretty good. Thank you so much, Jeremiah, for letting me come on and share with the listeners things I've experienced. When I wrote to you, I mostly am talking about something that's been happening on our family property. Back in the early 1900s, my grandparents homesteaded some land here. I've lived in southwestern PA all my life. The property is really beautiful. It's backed by a wooded hillside, and there's a farmer's field beyond that, and some other wooded areas and streams and rivers. The original house and outbuildings aren't there anymore, and we don't have any there, but our family has used the land for gatherings and things like that. This is just a pretty place to get away. Now, I can't remember the order that these two things happened, but on this property, I had a friend who passed away in 2017, and not on the property, but what I'm trying to say is I set up a tent there at that time because it was a place for me to get away, and it was calming, and I just really liked to go there, take a few walks in the woods. The one morning when I came to my tent, I just saw something that to me was so unusual. There was a log sitting upright, which had always been there on the property as far as I remember. But the thing that was unusual is there was this really beautiful bird's nest sitting right on that log. And it hadn't been windy. I couldn't figure it out. I thought, well, that is so pretty, and why is it just sitting right there at the entrance to my tent? And then it was either a little bit after or a little bit before I noticed something else. My path that I usually took through the woods, I am not like strictly religious, but spiritual, I guess. I had some religious statues, and I had put them at the bottom of these big old oak trees that my great-grandfather had planted. And I just had them sitting there. They just were comforting. Okay. So I would say possibly 3 weeks after I put them there, I was taking a walk, and I noticed they were all gone. So I searched the woods and the yard, and I to look for broken glass. I didn't see anything. The only thing that was going through my mind was that, well, I have my brother passed away, but he would sometimes walk on that property, but he was kind of disassociated with the family. So, but later we became close again. And he never mentioned anything about statues or bird's nests, and that's just not his personality anyway. Not a diss on him, but it's just not something he would do. But that was the only thing that my mind could go to. So I was talking with my sister. She actually owns the property now, technically. And I was saying that I had saved that nest, and I was showing her, and I said, it's so pretty. Remember how I just found it by my tent? that's when, for the first time, we were thinking that there was something involved here, like gift giving and gift receiving, even if it was unintentional on my part. So a few summers ago, my sister and I noticed broken branches in those woods at the entrances of a couple of the paths. Now, this was very close to where I found the nest, and the branches were green wood, snapped above what a tall human arm length would be. And just this past fall, we went to the property. I went with her. She wanted to check on an apple tree, which had come down. And right below one of those snapped branches, like at the entrance of the path, there was a sort of a ball made of intricately entwined branches. And they were, it was like the bark had been peeled off of them. It was. And they were real white looking, so that's why they caught attention. And none of the trees around it, had the same type of wood. So it really stood out. And my sister, she yelled into the woods, I know you're there. I don't want you here. Something like that. But we saw and heard nothing. Okay. About 3 weeks later, we were there again. And as we were looking at that ball, which was still there, we heard a loud crack in the woods. It was sort of near a place that she had seen some unnatural structures. She's really good at picking up on those. It was weird because it didn't quite sound like a branch or a tree fall. It hadn't been rainy or windy. So it was kind of startling. And then a day later, I was at that property because my husband's brother happens to live next door. And we heard another crash just like that. And I looked at the two guys and they said, oh, there's just an old tree, must have come down. So it was just kind of strange. Now, interestingly, near where I live, about 3 miles south of that property, there are several unnatural structures and X's in the woods along the river. And on one of my walks in the fall, I heard a noise that I had never heard before. And it was like, ooh. And I just looked around. I didn't see anything. I was actually filming on my phone, so I went back and listened, and there's a sound, but you can't make it out. But anyway, those things, you had mentioned wanting to hear stories from family properties, and I thought of that right away. And my sister is actually thinking about building a house there, but she's also a little bit worried about it. But I have experienced other things, too, that I think might be Bigfoot related. And if I have time, I can share a couple things with you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. Well, I'd say my first series of incidents took place around 2011, and it was in Southwest PA here. It was late September in the evening, and I was letting my dog in, and he's just a little Jack Russell. He was never afraid of anything, but I opened the door, and he was whimpering, and his ears were back, and he just couldn't wait to get in the house. I didn't think a whole lot of it, and then later, my son came home, I think from football practice, and he said, do you hear the weird owls outside? And I had thought I heard something, so I went out on the porch, and listened, and it was very strange. I was hearing like a whoop sound. I wish I could like demonstrate, but maybe just like a real guttural, loud whoop, whoop. And it was coming from different spots in the woods behind my house, because we live in kind of a little valley, and it's a wooded mountainside back there. So I just didn't know what to think. I went in the house. When I came back out just a few minutes later, then I heard a scream across from the front of my house across the river. There's a river real close to the front of the house. So I honestly couldn't figure out what was going on, and I thought, well, I know there are coyote around. I don't know if they make that kind of noise, but to me, it seemed impossible that it could be an owl. Now, I know that there's all different types of owls, and they make all different sorts of noises. One of the first things I did was go online and listen to different sounds of different animals. And there is an owl that might have been close to that, but it was a totally wrong time of year, and I don't even think they were in this area. I can't imagine a bird making that deep guttural noise. And to me, it seemed like there were, whatever these things were communicating with each other. So I kind of brushed it off. The next day, I was walking to my garden because I was picking tomatoes. I was going to make salsa. And I heard, it seemed like there were little pebbles or something hitting my neighbor's little outdoor building. And it just was weird because I couldn't see anything. And where I live, there's not a whole lot of houses, and people tend to not be around. They're either working or they're not out at night if it's even a little bit chilly. So I figured probably I'm the only one who noticed the noises that night. And now I'm hearing these little, like, pebbles. Also, I felt an eerie feeling like I was being watched or something. Within the next few weeks, my daughter was walking home just from the neighbors up the road. It was late at night. And she said she heard what sounded like a huge tree crash near the river across from our property, the same area where I heard that scream. It's interesting that a few miles behind the woods at the back of my property, there's a very large reservoir. And in 1998, park rangers reported to see a family of Bigfoots drinking from the reservoir. There also is a camping area around there that I think church groups camp there. And there was a report of either the camp counselors or some of the kids reported seeing or hearing something Bigfoot related. That's all in that same area, and it's really just right, very close to the woods at the back of my house. And I stayed there just they have some rustic cabins. I stayed in one with my sister one night. We made a fire, but she had to go home, so I was by myself staying overnight. And during the night when I woke up, I heard all kinds of like clanging noises, but it sounded like metal. I don't know. I looked out the windows and I didn't see anything. And then this might sound kind of crazy, but it was like right in front of my door, and the inside was this marshmallow that like had a bite out of it. And I know that wasn't there, but maybe that can be explained. I don't know. But my sister came back in the morning, and right in front of my door also was a little, like half a cashew, or no, not cashew. I can't think of the word. but a little like nutshell. And neither one of us had noticed it before. Now, those are little things. Who knows? But to us, it really kind of stuck out like it's a little bit strange. I had some other things happen probably around 2015 in the county just north of us. And I was caring for a friend who had some cognitive issues from a stroke, but we would ride on his gator, just all through the woods. It was a really big farm, and just enjoying nature. And we would feed the deer. And one afternoon, it was in the late spring, we were filling in ruts on the gator trail. And we were putting stones and rocks from the creek into the back of the gator because we were going to put them further up the trail to fill it in. Well, several seconds after throwing one of those rocks in the gator, we heard a sound from maybe 200 yards away. But it sounded like someone had just picked up a tree and just slammed it into the ground. And, it startled us both, and we immediately thought, well, that doesn't sound like a echo because all those rocks we threw in here, we didn't hear anything, and now all of a sudden there's this big noise. So later in the day, we drove back to the area where we heard it, because we figured there were workers in the woods for gas line or whatever, but there was nothing. We didn't see anything. Now, a few weeks after that, my friend, he was taking a ride by himself in his gator, and in the same area, he had trouble speaking, but he described that there was something very large behind him. He could I don't know if he said he saw it in peripheral vision, but he said it growled and screamed, and he said it felt like it wanted to kill him, and that's all he knows. And he's been in the woods all his life, and he was very scared by it. Also, one time, the farmer was having one of their cows butchered, and they gave us the tongue to put out in front of the trail cam that my friend kept. And we went and looked at that footage, and you can see the cow tongue, and then all of a sudden it disappeared. It's not on there. And it was gone when the day that we went to look for it. So that was also really strange. And one time, several of us were having a fire in that area in the evening, just enjoying the evening. It's a real pretty area. And all of a sudden, we heard the coyotes. Okay. Then, I don't know, it's a really weird laughing sound. But we aren't experts, so I don't know for sure, but we all thought it was very strange. And something that I found out recently, where my friend's farm is, there is another different reservoir than the one I mentioned, but there was a report, you can find it online, I believe, about a white werewolf or dogman type looking thing that a fisherman saw, and that's really close to where my friend lives. So it's just a lot of different evidence, and this is something that my brother told me. So, of course, it's not firsthand knowledge, and I know he doesn't mind me sharing it. But he was fishing with one of his buddies, and they were both, avid outdoorsmen. And they heard a scream and a growl, and they felt like it was headed towards them. And their hair stood up on their neck, and they just dropped everything and ran. and that's also right around this area. We're in the area of the ridge that's just east of the Chestnut Ridge. There's a lot of stuff goes on in the Chestnut Ridge. We're on the Laurel Ridge, which is just east of that. Also, my brother said there was a man who everyone referred to as the Hermit, and back in the 70s, he had a little cabin way out in nowhere. But my brother did talk to him once in a while when he was out, and he said that he saw glowing eyes in his cabin one night, and then a couple days later, he was carrying wood, and he heard something in back of him, and he turned around, and he said it must have been a Bigfoot. He said it was a big, hairy creature. He said, I just ignored it and went on with my life. So I guess it was just a one-time occurrence. But whenever, it was a few years ago, my sister and my daughter and I spent time at a cabin near Salt Fork, Ohio. And we had so many noises around us. It seemed like there was a tree knock in every corner of the property at one time or another. And we came back, we went to the store, we came back, and when we opened the door, there was this terrible scream. At first I thought it was the door squeaking, but my sister said, no, that was not the door. And okay, so we couldn't explain that. That night, while we were sleeping, my sister heard outside the window like babbling noises. She said they were like voices, but they were like babbling, like maybe a baby or I don't know exactly. But yeah, it really scared her, but she just went back to sleep. She said, I don't want to deal with this. And then before we left, we were spending our last little moments there, and we heard like a really loud, definite, like a 1, 2, 3 knock. So that was our experience there. There's other little things. My sister, when she was a teenager, she and my cousin, right around in this area, would take walks. They would stay at my grandma's, and they would take walks on the back roads and even swim at night in the river. But they, one evening, saw maybe a small balloon-sized orb, and it was white, and it was just kind of meandering and following them. And they just didn't know what to do. And they asked each other, do you know what that is? And neither one knew. So they decided just to walk back to Grandma's house because they did not want to have to figure out what that was. And she had seen some outside our childhood home too that seemed to have an intelligence to them, like they were circling around and looking for something. So I can't remember if there was anything else I wanted to mention to you, but I know that you really are doing good by letting people tell their stories. And even though I have not seen a Bigfoot, and I'm not saying I want to, I just really feel like all this evidence is something that I wanted to share because it's just so unusual.
Bobbi, thank you for sharing all these things that you've experienced. So you mentioned that pretty much we're looking at the Laurel Ridge area in a way, which definitely has a ton of activity. I think Forbes State Forest is over there in that area too, right?
Oh, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Which that is extremely active. There's a gentleman I talked to a few times about that. State Forest has a ton of Bigfoot activity. Just curious, what kind of, do you mind sharing what kind of were they statues of a certain saint that you would put out on the oak trees?
Yes. Yes, they were. One was St. Joseph, and the other was the Blessed Mother, and the other was, it was either St. Francis of Assisi or St. Therese. I can't remember. But like I said, they just kind of gave me comfort. It was like my little walk after my friend died. It helped me. But then they were missing. I could not figure out what was going on. Yeah.
So you had set up the tent on that property after your friend had passed away?
That's right. Yes.
Was it pretty soon after as well?
Yeah, it was maybe a week later, okay. Maybe not even. Yeah. Gotcha. And then I ended up taking it down, but not because I was afraid. It just was time. Like I didn't need it anymore, so I took it down.
How long would you say it was probably up for?
I would say, okay, it was maybe the middle of June to the end of August. That sounds about right. I think that's about what it was.
Okay. How much time do you think you spent out there in the tent?
Well, I think I would go almost every day. I wasn't working at the time. I was just helping my older parents, which is a job too. So I would take maybe an hour or two each day, and maybe on the weekends I wasn't there at all. So, it was a fairly constant that I would be visiting it, every day or so at least.
Yeah, that property has a lot of really, really interesting things going on it, from what you shared. And it is just very, I know it's a common theme that's come out in, well, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm doing a lot of episodes ahead of time because of travel. And recently, something I've just really started to notice is that a lot of these, there seems to be a traumatic event oftentimes involved, right? Like the loss of a friend or a family member or a divorce, something that like really, really affects the individual emotionally. It's something I'm starting to look into. It's a very, very interesting connection. I don't know if there's anything there, but we will see. And I'm also sorry that you lost your friend as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think that he was ready to go, but yeah, it's always sad. And it's interesting that you're mentioning that. I hadn't even thought of that, like maybe because there was that emotional thing going on with me that had something to do with whatever, being attracted or trying to whatever that is. That's a good point. I wouldn't have made that connection.
You mentioned you've never had a sighting before. Would you ever want to have a sighting though?
Oh boy, that is a good question. I think that if it would be meant to happen, then fine, but it's not something that I would try to do. I think I don't know how I'd handle it. I think I might be too scared. So I don't purposely try to have anything like that, but I'd probably prefer not to, just because I think it would scare me too much.
You mentioned that you have heard a whoop sound and something that sounded guttural and also a scream, correct?
Yes.
The whoop sound, Have you ever heard anything else that sounded similar to that, like at a zoo or online or anything like that?
No, definitely not. Not before or not since. Except for I did hear that ooh-ah, but that was like different.
Mm.
But the whoops, no. I had never heard anything like that before.
Okay. You also mentioned your son was hearing some weird owl sounds. Can you remind me, like, what was the part of it that made those owl sounds weird? Was it how loud they were, or maybe they sounded a little off at the end? Anything like that?
Well, to me, when I started to listen to them, he had just said owls and weird, and then he just, stayed in the house. He never thought about it again, I don't think. But when I went out then to listen, I thought, I have never heard an owl that loud, and it's not exactly a hoot. It was more like a whoop.
Okay.
I don't know if that's right, but what made it weird was it didn't quite sound like an owl. Plus, it was really loud, and it just seemed like it would be coming from a large animal.
Interesting. You mentioned you do have a weird sound recorded on your phone. It's just really hard to hear it.
Yes.
Is that something that you would be able to, would you be okay with? Maybe I'd love to have a listen to it. I don't know if you'd be able to share. I might be able to make that sound a little bit louder so you can actually hear it.
If you could, that would be great.
Cool.
I have no problem. I can send that to you. Yes.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be cool. Is things still happening on that family property still to this day?
We haven't noticed anything since, I think I said it was last fall, with that little ball that was woven. I know that there are unnatural structures up in there, but I haven't looked at them recently. My sister's very good at picking up on those. But there's nothing since, actually, the crash noise that we heard that didn't sound quite like a tree falling, and it didn't quite sound like a branch falling. I think that's the last thing that happened, and I think that was in the fall.
Okay.
So since then, we haven't noticed anything, but we're not there all the time, so I don't know.
Can you spend a little bit of time sharing what you mean by unnatural structures? Just kind of maybe just describing a little bit how they look.
Sure. The first time my sister ever pointed one out to me, we were taking a walk very close to my house, and there's just like a little road that turns into a dirt road and follows the Stony Creek River. And that's where I heard that ooh-wah sound. But not at this time that I'm talking about. I was with my sister, and she started looking at arches in some of the trees. And one was like obviously right over the path. And she was looking at it and said, I don't know how that could have naturally grown that way. And I said, oh, well, that is odd. And then as we walked further, we'd see little, X's. And she would show me, she said, see how this part of this little tree trunk was broken off here, and it was green. It was live wood. She said, I don't know who could do that. And then there would be another branch crossing it, making an X, and that would be like held up in place by another branch. And there are several of those. type of things. And one of them was like a, I don't know, it was like a little teepee almost. It was just like this gathering of sticks, and it made like a little teepee. And we joked and we said, well, maybe this is the baby Bigfoot area, because there were several little structures there. That's about the best I can describe. The way she explained it to me, she said, these are things that I don't think would happen by themselves in nature. And most of them were X's or arches.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. You mentioned that there was a story you heard about park rangers at a reservoir seeing a family of Bigfoot drinking from the reservoir. Was that right?
Yes, that was in either 1990 or 2000. I can't remember, but that is online. I don't know if anything ever came of it. Back that far, people probably just laughed it off, but they reported it. They felt it was important enough to report. And I think it was supposedly 2 adults and a juvenile, and they were drinking out of the reservoir. Yeah. Do you remember where you had read that? I've never heard that account. It's very, very interesting. Was it like BFRO or? Well, I guess I could tell you the name of the reservoir, and then you might be able to find it.
Okay.
It is the Quemahoning Reservoir or Dam. So it's Quemahoning. Hopefully you'd be able to find it with that, because I don't remember exactly what site it was.
Thank you. I'm gonna see. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is okay. So this is a new area for me. I'm definitely gonna let's see. I wonder how close this is. I'm looking up something real quick. Oh yeah, it's like half an hour away from Forbes. That's wild. Okay. So yeah, that whole area is crazy. Oh, that's funny. There's a business there in the middle called Bigfoot Construction.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. What are the chances, right?
Right. And that's the reservoir that is, if you would like walk up the mountain behind my house through all the woods and then cross a couple farmlands, then that's where that reservoir is.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
And it's one of those episodes where I think it's going to lead to a few really interesting things. Because we've kind of talked about, Forbes, but was not aware that, this whole area is pretty wild. If people are listening and have heard of other things happening in this area, definitely leave a comment, or you can send an email to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. But Bobbi, it's been a pleasure chatting with you on the show about what you've experienced. I think this will probably lead to some cool things coming out of Pennsylvania from this area. But before we end our time today, I want to make sure that you're able to share everything that you wanted to share today.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think we covered everything. And thank you so much. It's great to have a platform, that you can share this stuff, and every little bit helps. So.
Absolutely. And yeah, if you continue to experience things at, your place or the family property, you can always, send me another email. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear from you again. But thank you again, Bobbi, for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Just wanted to take a minute to say thank you truly for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Bobbi's story is one of those that leaves you unsettled, not because of fear, but because of how real and human it feels. A bird's nest, a tent in the woods, and a presence that might just be watching or even trying to connect. So huge thanks to Bobbi for being willing to share such a personal and emotional journey from the forest of Laurel Ridge to the banks of the Quemahoning Reservoir. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe to us on YouTube, hit that bell icon so you don't miss any new episodes, and share this with a friend who's into Bigfoot, Appalachia, or mysterious encounters. And if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you're following the show. And if you'd be willing to leave a review, it really helps more folks find us. And if you or someone you know has had a Bigfoot encounter, especially in Pennsylvania, anywhere near Laurel Ridge or the Chestnut Ridge, I'd love to hear from you. So shoot me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Also, don't forget, Sasquatch Summerfest is coming up July 11th through the 12th at Greenwaters Park in Oak Ridge, Oregon. And Bigfoot Society listeners can grab a 2-day pass for the price of a 1-day pass with code BFS at checkout. Tickets are available now at www.sasquatchsummerfest.com. So thanks again for being part of the Bigfoot Society, and until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never stop asking what else might be out there. And see you in the woods.